Mom, Dad, I just have to say, it breaks my heart watching you stress over dinner every night. This year, I don't want you doing the fridge stare down. Hot take. With the new Blue Apron, eating healthy is easy. They've got pre-made and one-pan meals with plenty of balanced nutrition. No subscription needed. You could be plating like a chef instead of negotiating with leftovers. Make it your healthy, tasty, and easy 2026 dinner resolution. Just saying.
Get 50% off your first 2 orders plus free shipping with code LISTEN50. Terms and conditions apply. Visit blueapron.com/terms for more.
It seems to be the theme for the Capital One Cup this year, doesn't it?
Do you mean the League Cup official Rantcast rules?
Yes, yeah, no, God, I've obviously lost myself in there, yeah. Official Rantcast rules, the League Cup, yep, it's Goal Fest. Some incredible games over the last couple of days.
Absolutely insane, and I guess we should go back, talking of absolutely insane, to the game in the First Division that we played against Chelsea at the weekend. Completely, normal game of football, no controversial incidents worth discussing there.
Yeah, absolutely none, yeah, I mean, it's like a park football, bit of kick around, a few mates, all very friendly, 15 penalties, 67 sendings off, and the referee is a daft racist.
So clearly the Gilluminati in full effect.
We had a long conversation last week about David Dean's influence at the FA, and I take it all back. Clearly, you were right, the conspiracy runs deep. Gil's effect has been pretty magnificent straight away.
I mean, the idea that somehow officialdom in British football is competent enough to run a conspiracy is truly one of the most ridiculous flights of fancy of our times.
Well, it's one of those things, it's the bullet doing a 90-degree turn, isn't it? Shot from the grassy knoll, and it does a spin and 3 backflips and then manages to get Kennedy right through his neck. So, yeah, look, there's no conspiracy. Shall we just deep dive into the refereeing controversy? Because that's the only thing that matters this week, isn't it? Forget football, forget the goals, forget the entertainment. All we want is the narrative of controversy.
Let's just get that really quickly out of the way. So we've got to touch on it, haven't we? I mean, we could make a unilateral decision not to. I do a couple of things I want to say about it, but yeah, and then I think we should devote the rest of the show to football. It wasn't the best refereeing performance I've ever seen, but nor was it by any stretch of the imagination the worst. The first sending off was clearly a legitimate sending off. The second, I think he had one of those moments that refs have sometimes when they decide to book a player and suddenly realise halfway through pulling out the yellow card they've already been booked and they're going to have to send him off. I think if he was fully cognizant of the fact that he'd already booked Torres, he probably just would have let it go, and it's kind of a bad decision, but from the ref's angle you can absolutely see why it looks like a massive dive, because Torres does essentially simulate a foul, even though there's a contact.
Well, he does, and he rolled around grabbing his knee when there was clearly no contact with his knee on anything. So if you're a Chelsea fan, you think that's a ridiculous decision because of the consequences of it, of course. And in most circumstances, when a player goes down like that, the referee doesn't give a yellow card. But quite clearly, there's been an edict from the FA at the moment, because we saw a rash of them at the weekend as well. So the FA has said to referees, you must book for simulation. So they're looking out for it. And Clattenburg was looking out for simulation. Saw what he thought was simulation from Torres, because he went down extremely theatrically, rolled around a lot, didn't seem like there was much in it, and pulled out a yellow card. And I think you're absolutely right. I think if Clattenburg had been a bit more cognizant of Torres' situation, then he probably wouldn't have pulled out the yellow card, and that piece of controversy wouldn't have come into the game. There are others, of course. Let's not forget the sending off of Ivanovic. Completely right, as you say. No chance. As Clattenburg said himself, I know it's bollocks, but it's not my fault. Quote, unquote. It always feels like a very harsh decision, doesn't it? Ashley Young has been fouled, but he's been very smart about cutting across the defender, so the defender had almost no chance but to foul him. And, you can call that gamesmanship, or some people call it cheating. I actually think it's the right side of gamesmanship, and Ashley Young's not always been on that right side. But in that case, I don't see that Clattenburg had any choice about that one at all.
No, absolutely. And the offside goal, Chicharito was offside. He was considerably less offside than Drogba was a couple of seasons ago, so and he was not offside when he touched the ball, which of course
I'm well aware that's not the rule and all of that, and the linesman, because, if we're going to call it the League Cup in the First Division, we've got to call them linesmen, haven't we? Didn't spot that, and it's a super difficult decision because he's got to literally look at two places at the same time there, and it was a really, really tight call, and, really hard to be hypercritical of the assistant for getting that one wrong, but he did get it wrong, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. But we move on to the actual football. A really interesting game. United absolutely raced out of the blocks,
and not what I was expecting at all. I have to be honest. The attacking lineup that Fergie picked, and it was a very attacking lineup, and there were consequences for that, of course. But yeah, super open. United went for it out of the blocks really fast. I kind of just the fact that in really big games over the last few seasons, Ferguson has tended to go a bit defensive, and United have been in their shell, and it's not always worked. And this was a surprise, especially at Stamford Bridge, where United haven't had very good results in recent season. I mean, Europe aside, it's been pretty bad, but it was great. First half an hour, really, really fantastic from United.
And just glorious to see. And, as soon as it went to 2-0, I did get that kind of, this is definitely not going to finish with us with a 2-goal winning margin. Thoroughly expected Chelsea to come back into it, but it was one of those things where it reminded me of that fixture that England played against Brazil in the World Cup in 2002, when just remember just wanting to get to half-time. And this was one of those where it's like, please just get to half-time without doing anything stupid, but Rooney couldn't quite make it, and in a kind of somewhat petulant and frustrated act, he had a very good game, and I'm not being overly critical, but it was a very poor foul to give away.
Completely needless, and in the spirit of criticising players who give away completely needless fouls, like Ferguson has decided to do this week, didn't criticise Rooney, funnily enough. Other players that are not in his good books did get the brunt of Ferguson's frustration, but yeah, completely pointless foul to give away by Rooney, really dumb.
Yeah, and a glorious free kick by Mata, and slightly, De Gea was kind of not brilliant for that free kick, but not terrible either by any means.
I've heard some criticism of him for that one, and I think that's really hard because he's pretty much unsighted for most of that free kick. Yes, it was on his side, but he's taken a step to the left, anticipating the ball over the wall, and Mata's gone the wrong way in many respects, and he's hit it to the right of the wall. You could question the positioning of the wall, of course, because you really shouldn't be able to get it around the wall like that easily, and he's hit it really clean, and it's just a true strike. So I think we give a lot of praise to Mata, who on current form is probably the best player in the league at the moment, and not too much criticism to De Gea for not getting that one. Even if he'd got a hand to it, would he have kept it out? It's such a clean strike.
Well, best player in the league, maybe apart from a couple of players that play for us. And De Gea was just extraordinary in that game. There was a couple of moments where his kind of reticence when the ball's played in from out wide and his lack of control over the box were an issue, but in the interest of balance, he made saves which can only be described as superhuman. The one at his near side from the header from short range. Yeah, I just don't understand how that all happened with the laws of physics and that.
Well, he manages to do that quite often, yeah. Fantastic reflexes. I hate the term great shot stopper because it feels quite empty and meaningless, because all cliches are, but a great shot stopper, isn't he? And just great reflexes to get across, clawed it out, not just the tip of the fingers, but a full hand, and then actually managed to push the ball away as well. How many stops did he make with his feet? I think there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I again, saw a lot of criticism of that. I think if that's the best response, if it's better than going down and dropping the ball in the 6-yard box, if he thinks he can get it away, which he did, obviously against Braga there was a mistake there in Europe, but I thought great performance from De Gea, mostly, a few mistakes aside, and he's still learning, he's still growing, and it's been nice that he's had what did he have? 5 games in the trot before Lindegaard came in for the League Cup game, and that's probably been very good for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And NR Miller 0102 will be pleased that you just had that discussion, because he's just said would simply love to hear more about David De Gea's saving abilities with his feet. It is remarkable, and it is something to do with how agile he is, and he's just Fergie described him, I think it was this week since we last talked, as a fantastic goal line keeper. Yeah, it was in his Friday presser last week. He's just a fantastic goal line keeper, and that's a slightly better way of saying shot stopper, really, isn't it? Because it's more than just that. He's phenomenal at keeping a ball out of the net if there's any human way that it can be done.
Yeah, and he just needs to develop those other skills, doesn't he? He needs to be a fantastic 6-yard box keeper as well, and he's not a fantastic 6-yard box keeper right at the moment.
I definitely don't see why it couldn't happen in the future. And actually, it's funny because, you know, normally when there's the keeper rotation and Lindegaard gets in the side, and you sort of think, oh dear, you know, but it's brilliant to me that he's picked Lindegaard in the League Cup, because it's a sort of clear message that De Gea's the number one. But anyway, we really cannot talk about this every single week for the whole season, although we might end up doing exactly that. Some noteworthy United performances then in that game. I thought Chicharito was great again when he came on. He just loves Chelsea, Chicharito, and he was excellent when he came on. He took his goal brilliantly, even though he was clearly offside. And Van Persie early on in that game causing all sorts of ruckus. Some decent sort of defensive performances as well. Raphael once again gone through, I think he's gone through 2 games against Chelsea without making a mistake, basically, since we last spoke. And you know, when you were saying Mata's the best player in the league this season, and you know, definitely he's the best number 10 in the league this season, but the best number 2 by an absolute mile is Rafael da Silva.
Yeah, he's been absolutely fantastic, Raphael. This is the player everyone wanted him to become. You know, he's not making mistakes. He's energetic, gets up and down. He's a great attacker. He's a great defender. He's just becoming a really, really top-class fullback. Look, he's still young. He'll probably make mistakes this season, and we should expect that. But it's really nice to see. He's getting a lengthy run in the side, and it's really helped him that Smalling and Jones are injured in that respect. You know, he has to play every week, and he's been really, really good. So that's great. Coming back to your earlier point, Hernandez, wonderful finish for the winning goal. I mean, in almost the way that only he can, and managed to adjust his body for, you know, out of nowhere really, and do that. And how much did Van Persie love his goal? Loved it.
He likes Chelsea a lot as well, doesn't he? He's a big fan of playing against Chelsea. So I kind of want your take on that game as a whole, Ed, the ebb and flow of it, and why it went the way it did, and what it was that caused us to let Chelsea back in it. So sort of, you know, it's also like when they decided to get back into it, there was nothing we could do to stop them, sort of thing.
Well, I think part of it's that, yes. I mean, they overpowered us in midfield. We sat back. There's that kind of thing about being 2-0 up, and just the mental thing of not attacking as much anymore and allowing Chelsea to come back into it. I thought the Chelsea front 4 were excellent. Oscar's a fine player, and he's such a fine player, and he was absolutely brilliant in that game, and Chelsea came storming back, really did, you know, and for a long time you couldn't really work out what way that game would go, of course, you know, and officials influence the nature of the game, of course, you know, sending off and all of that is always going to do that. But even after Ivanovic went off, Chelsea were on the front foot for quite a long time.
Yeah, I mean, the Illuminati really needed the 2 sendings off, didn't they? One wouldn't do, and that's why we had to have the controversial one as well. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and it did. You know, you said that United and Chelsea are 2 sides with quite similar weaknesses and strengths, and that was absolutely writ large. Sleepy Nick wrote a phenomenal preview of where United could cause Chelsea damage, and singled out the right hand side and Valencia and Ashley Cole, and the way that link up play with Raphael, and then whichever centre forward is on the right, and it was mostly Van Persie in that opening dominant 20-minute spell, and he was absolutely spot on. He kind of basically described the way the goals would go in before the game started. And you sort of singled out both United and Chelsea as having quite significant defensive weaknesses, and you know, the fact that we've played them twice and there's been a total of 14 goals in those 2 games is sort of ridiculous, isn't it?
Well, for a lot of the period in the league game, there was no pretense of trying to defend through midfield at all. There just was no cover at all through midfield. Carrick was attacking, Cleverley was attacking, everyone was attacking. Finally, Ferguson just admitted it and put Rooney in midfield instead, who didn't really play as a midfielder either, and he just had Carrick in there on his own. It's the ultimate donut formation. I mean, if Barcelona are going to play without strikers, we're going to perfect the no midfielder midfield. Not just not very good, no midfielders at all.
But there was quite a lot of criticism I saw of Tom Cleverley's performance. What did you make of it?
No, I didn't think that was fair. I mean, I know he gave away the ball, but a few times, you know, he's a bit untidy, wasn't he, with the possession, which is very unusual for Cleverley. But I thought he was creative, movement was great. He offered nothing defensively. He doesn't, really. So I don't think some of that criticism was fair. I don't think he was that bad. I think he helps a lot with United's attacking play. You know, he's so quick to recycle possession. He moves it really smartly. Sometimes you feel he's being a bit safe, but I think as he's getting more games, I think he's getting more confident with that. He's trying more risky balls, and most of them come off, and some of them don't.
I'll go with that for sure. So I guess then there was weird fallout from that game. So much sour grapes. Understandable, I guess, from Chelsea's point of view, that they felt that, in spite of a pretty decent comeback from them, they'd been somewhat robbed by the referee, and it's absolutely fair enough that they feel like that. But horrible things have come out in the aftermath of that. As far as I understand it, and the story has been a bit shifting, it seems to me that Mikel has said that Clattenburg used racially abusive or inappropriate language towards him, which is a frightening thought.
I think in the parlance, the story's been evolving from Chelsea.
Yeah.
It's interesting that Chelsea went public so quickly, and Arsene Wenger was very critical of Chelsea going public because it was unnecessary before the evidence has been collated for that to happen. And you kind of feel, because they put the statement out less than 2 hours after the game, that somehow they might have done that in the heat of the moment. That wasn't the most sensible thing to do, especially as they've now withdrawn the accusation. And we only know it's an accusation because they managed to brief the press, even if they didn't actually say any of this in their public statement, that Clattenburg called Juan Mata a Spanish twat, and that one's been withdrawn, and it would appear from the video coverage that he didn't say anything of the kind. And then the even more disturbing accusation that he called Mikel a monkey, which is, if true, absolutely disgraceful, of course, and just in the way that I said that John Terry should be sacked for his crime, so should Clattenburg if he's proven to be the case too. And much like I said with the John Terry case, I really, really desperately hope it's not true, because, where can football go from this? It feels like a game that's lost itself. And it's not just the controversy. I know I said a bit about the narrative all being about the controversy, but, football does have to then look inward and go, if referees are abusing the players racially, what is the point of any of it that we're doing? If the people we're supposed to respect are behaving like that. And of course we don't know. And most people in officialdom think it's preposterous that Clattenburg would behave like this, and just don't believe it and think there's been some kind of mix-up or whatever, We'll find out in time, won't we? And I think the fact that Clattenburg and his assistants are all wired up ought to give some pretty good evidence. It's just a shame there isn't a recording.
It's one of those things where you hear that story, and my kind of, if I just think, well, what is my kind of instinctive response to that? Not that that has any particular value in this case, but my instinctive response to that is that does not seem to me like something that would happen. But you never know, right? And the one thing that really has bugged me a bit is I've seen quite a lot of people saying, if this turns out not to be upheld, then Mikel should be punished, and it's like, no way, because that's what Liverpool fans were all saying about Evra during the Suarez case. And if it's a genuine misunderstanding and he thinks that that's happened, he should be speaking out and saying it's happened. If it's a sort of malicious attempt to besmirch a man's name, then if you can prove that, that's obviously very different, but that would seem to be somewhat of an unlikely scenario as well.
Yes, I think the let's punish Chelsea if they're making it up line is just preposterous. It's not about that. Let's find out what the truth is.
Yeah.
And I hope somehow the truth does come out and we find out what happened. Your initial reaction is the reaction of a lot of people. I find it unthinkable that a referee would call a black player a monkey. I have to say, I can't feel any scenario in which that would happen. But that's the accusation, right? And we've got to find out whether that's true or not, because if it is true, it's quite incredible, really, and it's going to be very hard for referees to come back from that. Not just Clattenburg, obviously, he'll be finished, but referees as a whole to get the in the FA's parlance, the respect to gender back will be near impossible.
Yeah, so I guess we just have to kind of hope that that's not a thing that happened. That's where I'm standing.
I mean, I've seen some suggestions, and I think they are just suggestions just because of the language, that he called him a cheeky monkey or something like that, And there's been a misunderstanding about what that means, because obviously it has very, very different connotations than calling someone, who's black a monkey.
Yeah, of course. Just to bring up the boring subject of football again, I've just dragged up my stats thing, and Ashley Young, 17 out of 18 passes in the attacking third. Raphael, 14 out of 14 passes in the attacking third. Michael Carrick, 13 out of 14 passes in the attacking third. Nice stats. Just a random little stat bomb to drop in so we can talk about football as we move into the next game against Chelsea, which obviously took place in a ridiculously charged atmosphere, given all that had gone before. Lee Mason and Ryan Giggs having a right old chuckle in the tunnel before the game. Pretty sure Giggsy said, "You're looking forward to this one, Lee." No pressure.
Right, no pressure at all, yeah. God, I mean, worst job on the planet, right? I mean, there's almost nothing that Lee Mason could have done right, and he's taken some flack from Chelsea afterwards as well. I know Mr. Handball, but for the most part, it wasn't a bad performance at all. 3 penalties, and it's not that bad a performance. So, given how hard that was, there's no fun in racism, but the humour, if you want to have a bit of gallows humour, United fans unfurled 2 banners, Clattenburg, referee, leader, legend, and another one that said Chelsea attacking racism since Sunday.
Yeah, standing up against racism since Sunday is one of the greatest banners of all time. It's up there with against modern football for sure. The Clattenburg leader, legend one feels a little more like kind of on the nose, but there's 2 readings of it, and one is like they're bigging up Clattenburg because he gave him loads of free kicks, but I don't think it's that, especially not in the context of having the standing up to racism since Sunday.
Clearly it's a pop at JT, isn't it, who apparently came down from the stands. He watched the game in the stands this is Sunday rather than the Carling Cup, and joined in the fun in the referee's dressing room where someone, an unnamed person, threatened to break Clattenburg's legs. So the story, it's briefing and counter briefing and all of that.
When you say someone, you're talking about John Terry, aren't you, Ed?
No, I wouldn't possibly say that, but if there's a man that might threaten that, hey, the cat fits.
Relentless chants of "Where's your racist centre half?" In the game, in the first game, they were singing "Where's your racist captain gone?" But I think "Where's your racist centre half?" is just much funnier. It's much more like dismissive, and you got to laugh, haven't you? Otherwise, you would genuinely just turn off the TV and give up on football in general. United's away fans, and that I know we talk about it a lot, but it was like just a parody of brilliant away support versus kind of completely flat home support. Just endless variety and singing, and they let off a flare and a bloke ran on the pitch, and it all got a bit out of hand, as it does when there's that level of atmosphere created. But there's a phenomenal amount of noise and interest.
United's away support is everything that the home support isn't. I don't get to nearly as many away games as I'd like to. And I used to go to a very, very many, but yeah, I love the away support. I think it's fantastic. The atmosphere, the banter, the wit, and the biggest repertoire of songs in the league by a mile. It's fantastic, and they were great again.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, so let's talk about the football in that game. Bizarre game to finish 5-4, especially on the back of that 7-5 the night before the Arsenal Reading game, and just one. I kind of almost wish Chelsea had scored again at the death, so it would have been 6-4, and we could have had 7-5, 6-4, but no tennis score was had, just a virtual cricket score as goals just flew in and everyone's given up on defending.
Well, apparently so. I mean, not quite as dramatic as the Arsenal game on the Tuesday night, which was one of the most remarkable games I've ever seen, I think. I mean, just incredible. You wouldn't believe it if you hadn't seen it. You really wouldn't believe it, would you? And as in the Arsenal game, in the United game, the quality wasn't always very high, right? Mistakes all over the place. A horrendous mistake for Giggs' first goal, very neatly slotted away. Some pretty poor defending, I've got to say, by Keenan Wooten in the central defence for United, and by the end they looked absolutely shattered, didn't they? And it was really hard on them, and that's a tough lesson learned, as Ferguson said, and shades of France in 1994, I think, with Nani giving away the ball for Chelsea to equalise via the penalty in the last minute, a Hazard penalty, and yeah, just drama all around. And how many pens were there in that game? 3, I think, something like that. And so great entertainment, not great quality.
Player that did play with great quality for the 65-70 minutes that he was on the pitch was Anderson, the much maligned Anderson.
3 assists.
Yeah, and a moment of absolute pure magic. About 14 minutes in, Anderson sort of flicks the ball up over the defensive player and runs around him, gets the ball, and my entire Twitter timeline just exploded with @mentions for Beautifully Red saying, put that in, and it is a really great gif, so well worth checking out. But yeah, Anderson, 3 assists, and just an all-round dynamic, important performance, and I wonder if he's put himself in contention for some more high-profile fixtures.
Maybe. And we see this from Anderson, don't we? Now and again, a great performance, and then it all goes a bit flat. He doesn't put the right performances in training. He's out of the team and out of the game, These comments and this conversation could be had at any point over the last 5 years and still be relevant.
Yep.
Right? Yeah. And that's the problem with Anderson. And, he had a good game, and he was very effective. He lasted 80 minutes or whatever it was, and that was very good for him, Not everyone on the United side did himself proud. I think, obviously Michael Keane and Scott Wharton had a tough game. I thought Raphael was good. Butner had a bit of a tough one defensively, I thought.
Complete shocker for the penalty, the first penalty.
Yeah, so that's tough on him. Interesting that Tunnicliffe got on, so, Ferguson's not punishing him for the high-speed drink driving. Many people wondered whether he'd ever be seen at United again, and Ferguson's taken quite a tough line on this in the past. I mean, he actually sacked a player once for drink driving, so you don't see that often in football, do you? So Tunnicliffe done very well to get back into the team quite so soon after that. And there was an Italian striker came on. I was a bit confused about who this was because I hadn't seen him in so long, but Federico Macheda is still alive. Who knew?
Still alive, still in the Man United squad.
Quite remarkable.
And Ferguson in the post-match interview was talking about his plethora of strikers. I guess we'll come on to that most high-profile moment of that post-match interview, but he was talking about his plethora of strikers, and he said Makeda's one of the best finishers at the club, which is obviously incredibly high praise, but the fact that he's nowhere near the first team clearly shows the rest of it's not quite there.
His quality outside the box isn't terrible, but it's not great. It's the attitude, right? You watch a reserve game and you're just pulling your hair about. He's a young player. He's trying to make it United. He wants to make it at United. And shouldn't you be absolutely desperate? I mean, you should be doing anything. You should be walking over your own grandmother to impress. And he gives the sense and the aura of a player who just doesn't care enough.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't watch much of the United reserves, but that's what I hear from the people that do. So, I think we've all reached a point where we've all accepted that Makeda hasn't got a long-term future at United. But I do think he's got a decent career somewhere else. He didn't really do much in the League Cup game. Wharton and Keane, actually they did pretty well for most of the 90 minutes. They only let in 2 goals, which is not bad, and then it was just such an unfortunate moment in that last minute because it was there, wasn't it? It was just a whisker away, and sadly Wharton sort of bundled into Ramirez, and unquestionably a penalty. And then he made the mistake for the Chelsea's fourth goal. But I think by that point, they were exhausted, and I think understandably for a young player like that, giving away that penalty in the last minute just took it out of them. They just didn't have the sort of heart for extra time, and I don't say that as a criticism at all. I mean, they literally haven't learnt yet how to deal with that level of disappointment on that kind of stage and still be able to maintain a good level of football,
Yeah, and quite a lot of criticism written afterwards from people floating around, of course, and a lot of debate about him. I have to say, my feeling is that he won't make it at United. He's not quite good enough, and he's too slow. And the first bit maybe you fix with patience. I mean, there's been some Evans, Fletcher, Raphael now. The patience shown has paid off, and maybe it would, but I think the speed bit you can't fix, and I don't think he'll make it the very top level, but I think he'll have a good career. Keane's slightly different, because I think that the progress he's made in terms of his quality over the last 18 months is absolutely remarkable, and he's gone from I wasn't quite sure about him as a reserve right back to he's got a real chance of making it at United. And, we'll see. He's a very young player, and it's really hard to make a call on that one, especially central defenders. It's a really tough one for a young player to make it at Old Trafford. But and coming back to your original point, yes, by the end they were shattered mentally, physically, the whole lot, and great experience for them in a way. Though you hope they learn from it.
And that kind of addresses a question that at Chris K93 has asked, where he says, how do you see Keane fitting in at United in the future with the likes of Evans, Smalling and Jones all sort of battling for that position? And it is a difficult time to be a very talented young centre-back. But then, Johnny Evans has shown, he had Rio and Vidic ahead of him, which many people would have as, a decent number of people would have as United's best ever central defensive partnership. And Johnny Evans has managed to start to carve out a career for himself at the club. And
very much so. And look, the fact is that Rio is unlikely to be at the club beyond this summer, and maybe not Vidic either. And they're talking about December now for Vidic, and it was November, and I think it will stretch on beyond that. I think having such a bad knee injury, the meniscus tear, after having an even more serious knee injury before that, I think that's quite serious actually, and I'm not sure that Vidic will come back quite the same. So look, Smalling and Jones are back soon. Evans has cemented his place place in the side, and there's an opportunity there for another player. If King can do enough in the next few months, maybe he goes on loan for the second half of the season, really impresses, he could be part of the squad next season. There's, that's not beyond the realms of reason at all. Or if Ferguson doesn't believe he's quite ready, he'll probably buy another central defender next summer.
And I think a word for the fact that Wootton and Keane were playing together, which means that there wasn't Rio there to put his arm around Wootton after during the little extra time he bit, and he was quite he had Bootner to the left of him and Keane to the right of him, so he was kind of pretty much on his own, Wootton, wasn't he? He didn't have that senior figure nearby. I mean, Darren Fletcher was dropping quite deep a lot, but I bet he felt pretty lonely actually at that moment. Darren Fletcher, another fine shift from D-Fletch, and Ferguson said obviously he can't play every 3 or 4 days, but he's looking after himself really well and managing the condition really well. So it's interesting that Ferguson uses that language, and that's clearly the situation, isn't it? So it's not like D-Fletch is better, but he's managing his situation.
I mean, it gives me the impression that he's not going to be ready for the first team for a very long time, though, right? And because he's never going to be in absolute peak condition if he's managing this condition all the time. I mean, maybe I'm totally wrong, because I clearly have no medical knowledge or experience, and it just feels that the difference between being a very top player at the top of the Premier League and just being average is what is it, 0.5% or something? Just those little things that make such a massive difference, and it kind of tells me that he's not going to be ready to be performing at Premier League level at any kind of quality. And we'll see. And he's changed his role. The games he's come back in recently, he's been very, very defensive. He's not the box-to-box player that we once saw. He's obviously conserving his energy and fitness because it's not quite there at the levels that it was before. So, hey, I hope he somehow manages to come back and he's the player he once was. But I think we're quite a long way away from that.
And I guess talking of players that don't seem to be the player that they once were, we need to raise the vexed question of Nani. When I put out the shout for Twitter questions earlier today, as I do every week, basically I had a flood of people asking questions about Nani, whether he's still going to be with us in January. It was almost about 50-50, saying one half saying that they really hope he is, and the other half saying they can't wait for Fergie to get shot. I am unsurprisingly caught between those two positions in my usual fence sitting, because I can definitely conceive of a scenario where Nani finds some motivation and fixes his relationship with the boss and becomes a really important player for us again, but that seems to be the less likely of the two scenarios. Especially Fergie came out in his his interview after the League Cup fixture and basically accused Nani of throwing away the game for United.
A kind of mirroring of France '94 and David Ginola getting the blame for knocking France out when they lost 2-0 to Bulgaria at Parc des Princes, wasn't it? I thought it's really bizarre of Ferguson. That's twice in as many a few weeks now that he's actually come out and singled out a player, and he did David De Gea, and actually name-checking a player in the way that he did. It was a little odd, and I think kind of betrays some of the frustration that Ferguson has now, and the story appears to be that Nani's not prepared to sign a new contract, not the level United are offering. United aren't prepared to offer more because they don't believe he's within the top bracket of players at Old Trafford, and while Ferguson may value him as a player in terms of the numbers he puts up, he's not prepared to make him a first team regular because he's not prepared to commit to the club, and he only wants to play players who are committed, and I'm sure that's a press version of things, but there definitely seems to be a level of frustration here that won't resolve itself. I'd be really surprised if it goes in January, because what's the point of getting rid of effective players in the middle of the season? But it's almost impossible to conceive of a scenario where he actually stays beyond next summer.
Yeah, I have to say I don't think it's so unlikely that he's going to be gone in January, because I think Ferguson might not want him around anymore, basically. I think it probably depends on the fitness of key players in similar positions, fitness and form of key players in similar positions, and it would be a shame for Nani's United career to end this way, but I don't think it's going to end on a high, is it? Because it does seem to just be sort of petering out, and it wasn't just the wording that Ferguson used, but you mentioned the word frustration, and it was almost through gritted teeth. You could visibly see in his body language the level of frustration that he has with Nani and the kind of tone of voice that he used. It was very it felt very authentic actually from Ferguson. It felt like he was sort of saying exactly what he felt about that situation.
Yes, I think there's an awful lot of frustration there. Yeah, I really think there is, and it kind of comes into another point I wanted to talk about. Players leaving and not quite fulfilling their their potential. Paul Pogba storming it up in Italy at the moment. Star of the show for Juve, scored against Bologna the other day, and everyone said he's off to Juve. I'll never get into that midfield because there were some fine players in central midfield at Juve, and there he is playing most weeks.
Now, I think the most telling thing really about the narrative of how people talked about Pogba leaving to go to Juventus was a kind of odd, misguided arrogance about United's position in world football. Not that we're not, incredibly important club, but the idea that somehow it was taking a massive step down in status to go to Juve seemed absolutely ridiculous to me. And also, I kind of thought that it has to be on the promise of first team football. That must be what he's going for. And yeah, we just talked about Pogba leaving or not leaving over and over and over again last season, and I really wish United had got it together to keep him, but obviously they weren't prepared to break policy on wages and didn't see where he'd fit into the first team, which seems...
It just seems bizarre, doesn't it? Yeah.
He'd fit in the middle, a big hole in the middle of United's team. You could put him there.
Yes, right in the... He'd be the jam in the donut, wouldn't he? And it's ridiculous to talk about Juve somehow being a step down. Okay, look, they've moved to a new stadium. It's a smaller stadium. They had Calciopoli and out of Serie A for a while, and they just won the title, and first time in like a decade, nearly a decade. And so the club as a whole has gone through a tough time in the last few years. But this is a club that's won 28 Italian titles. 28. Right? Don't tell me they're not one of the giants of European football. Two Champions Leagues or UEFA European Cups, and that's only one behind United, and runs up on it's like 5 or 6 times. Sorry, I'm going from memory here, but it's a lot. Yeah. Right? This is a giant of European football. Let's not disrespect them. And Pogba is showing the talent that everyone believed he had, right? And whether he went because he wasn't getting enough football, and it seems bizarre that Ferguson just didn't give him many minutes last season. We were frustrated, right, when he didn't play in the League Cup ties, and wasters of space like Michael Owen were playing, and so he was probably frustrated. Maybe it's the agent and the fact that he wanted a big payoff and money, but it looks like he's worth every single penny. I mean, Juve got him on a 4-year contract at €1 million a year, paid basically nothing in compensation. Massive bargain, right? Massive bargain, and United have lost out on a player who's now worth 10 times that.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, I feel like we're going over old ground, but the whole thing about the nature of the football market changing and the pressure on pay for younger players is becoming more and more significant because younger players are more and more important given just the nature of football finance and all that kind of stuff, and the fact that United weren't prepared to compete on wages for a young player with that level of potential. It's a difficult position, isn't it? But basically, it means what's come to pass will happen, which is that the very best young players, if they're not United born and bred, are probably going to think seriously about the options available to them elsewhere.
Well, they might. They might do. I mean, it's a competitive market. But yeah, you're right. We're going over old ground, and I guess we don't need to do that again. We've talked about the football gone. There's football coming up as well. It's right in the thick of back-to-back football at the moment, isn't it? I suppose that's pretty exciting, but it means we have an awful lot to talk about on these podcasts.
So we'll try and build in some Twitter questions as well. At Footy Hack asks, should we play Scholes, Cleves, Carrick on Saturday, or just 2 from that 3? 2 from that 3, or even 2 from the 4, including 3 from the 4, including Anderson, because it's got to be in the mix for consideration for this fixture. Arsenal at home, seem to remember this went all right last season.
Yeah. I mean, talking about cricket scores of goals that we've had recently, it would be nice to have another one, wouldn't it, at the weekend? Can't see it. Really can't see it. I'm not sure United will stick 8 past Arsenal. That was a very, very golden moment. But I'm really looking forward to it. I mean, Arsenal scoring a hatful of goals recently. So United can't stop scoring at the moment. Every single game we've managed to score plenty, which is kind of important because can't defend for toffee at the moment. So I'm really looking forward to this game. I think it's going to be a really cracking fixture.
Absolutely. It's worth pointing out that Reading put 5 past Arsenal this week as well. So, it's not like Arsenal are having the best defensive season as they wouldn't be from the personnel they've got available to them. They've got some excellent defenders in there, but also massive potential for a Rick. So I definitely think it's going to be another score. And of course, the big score that we're all referring to is when United beat Arsenal 9-1 last season, because as we all know, Robin Van Persie's goal counts for us now.
Look, he's nailed on score, isn't he? It'll be interesting. What's he going to do? I mean, he celebrated like a madman against Chelsea. Loved it. Loved to see it. But I think he was at Arsenal for 9 years, and obviously has a lot of respect for them. And I suspect he'll score, and there'll be a very muted, if any, celebration at all. Interesting. Arsenal fans, I assume they'll boo him, as is the way with modern fandom and all that. But they shouldn't, should they? You know, it's really not Robin Van Persie's fault that he decided he'd actually like to win something, before he ended his career.
Yeah, I mean, they've basically been singing "She Said No, Robin, She Said No" for 90 minutes every game since he left. So not sure they're going to give him the best of receptions, but you never know, do you? Because football fans do sometimes have the potential to surprise you with an unexpected bit of classiness out of nowhere. Although, I have to say it would be a surprise, and it wouldn't be such a surprise if Robin Van Persie goes ballistic after scoring a last-minute winner in this one. I would quite like to see that in a way, because I do think, I'm sure if the situations were reversed and United hadn't won anything for a few years, and Rooney went to, if Arsenal had won all the titles in between and Rooney went to Arsenal, we'd all be a bit annoyed with him. But the whole narrative from Arsenal fans, by which I mean Piers Morgan, out of this, that somehow
because clearly that is the narrative, isn't it? Yeah. Piers Morgan, his Twitter feed is absolutely cracking. I mean, 20 minutes in, he was like, Wenger's got to go. I said this before, he's got to go. It's like the 14th time he's asked for Wenger to be sacked in the last few months, and by the time 90 minutes was ran, was Wenger genius. He's beyond parody, isn't he?
Tactics wise, obviously Van Persie will start. I think that is the only thing I can say for sure. I would be shocked if De Gea doesn't play. Raphael's a certainty. Rio and Evans, they're both fit, right? No reason they can't play.
Right, Evra comes back in. I think the team pretty much picks itself, actually, and I assume Valencia will play, and I assume Young will play. Rooney will definitely play, and so will Van Persie. So really, it's just the central midfield pair that is the question, and Scholes didn't play this week, so I suspect he'll play because Ferguson will probably want that little bit of control rather than Cleverley, so I suspect it'll be Scholes and Carrick in the centre of midfield, and there you go, that's your 11.
I wonder how deep Rooney will play. Margaret from Rochdale seems to have talked Fergie out of the diamond, but you wonder whether there'll be some aspect of Rooney coming and dropping into midfield.
Balls deep. He'll be as deep as it gets, Rooney. He'll basically be at the point of a three in midfield. Absolutely sure, because Arsenal will play three in there, and that's what United will try and do to match it up.
Yeah, okay, so I would like to blast through a few Twitter questions before we move on to a little preview of the Braga game. We've got a question from at Coombeson, Coombeson, who's asked loads of good questions in the last couple of weeks. We've not picked out any, so I'll do two of his. Which United player has impressed you the most so far this season? And there's been a few standout players this season. Carrick's been quietly effective most of the time. De Gea's been extraordinary a few times, a bit shaky. But, we were bigging up Raphael big time, and I think he's the player I've been most surprised by. And then the player I've most enjoyed watching has probably been Van Persie.
Yeah, Robin Van Persie. I mean, he's a standout because he scored all the goals, right? And it's the hardest thing to do in football, and he's managed to do it. And there's been no kind of bedding in time at all, just straight on with the job. And I think you pointed out the other week, not only has he scored goals, but his touch is magnificent, and he just seems to pick the right pass. And I think he's got better with that aspect of his game as the weeks have gone on. And Raphael, almost faultless, just fantastic from him. And my Twitter stalker that hates me bigging up United players will be on the case again, but I think he deserves it. Carrick, he's done all right, but let's be honest, midfield has been a little bit of a disaster this season, because it's causing United a lot of problems, and defence has rotated around an awful lot. I don't think Raphael aside, you can really call out any of the defenders for having a great campaign. I mean, Evra blows hot and cold, ditto Rio, he's had some big errors. Evans has made some errors, although I think he's been pretty steady since he came back into the side, and Rooney's been, good on and off, hasn't he? And actually, I think last month he's been really good, Rooney, and it's nice to see that.
I was just going to say, actually, if it was the player that's most impressed me in the last month, I think since he came back from that horrible leg cut and he'd returned to fitness, because he started the season really poorly.
Right, yeah.
But he's been absolutely excellent, and it's really, really really exciting. You know, just that, like, in that Chelsea game in midweek, I was super excited about Chicharito, who's just been, like, caught fire again, which is brilliant and definitely gives Ferguson one of them headaches. But yeah, phenomenal to see Rooney approaching something of his best in the, you know, the position that he's going to have to accept is his position at United now, which is at the tip of a diamond in midfield as the deeper of two forwards, however you want to play it. It's very tactically flexible, but he's basically an attacking midfielder stroke forward now, isn't he? You know, he's somewhere between the two.
In the hole, yeah. And you know, in many ways I think that's his best position. I think there's more product when he plays up front because he scores more goals. But I think the natural state of Rooneyism is sort of in the hole. It's a problem for Gikawa when he comes back, and obviously he's not fit at the moment, so it's not a dilemma for Ferguson. But yeah, how Kagawa gets back into the side. And Chicharito, yes, it looks like he's coming back into form, which is like long overdue, isn't it? He's not going to get a game though. He's not going to start against Arsenal. But if there's just no, basically Rooney would have to play absolutely in central midfield, which of course he did against Chelsea for some time last weekend, but I can't see Ferguson starting like that at all.
No, absolutely. I totally agree, but I think as the season progresses as a whole, having Cheech in decent form is incredibly useful, isn't it?
It really is.
Also, I love the Fresh Prince alongside. You know, I love Danny Welbeck. I think he's had a slightly mixed season so far, but I just think he offers so much. Anyway, we've talked ad nauseum about how exciting it is that United have got so much attacking talent, but it really is coming to fruition. You know, we're scoring tons and tons of goals, and it's a right old laugh, you know. At Sigurdi asks, talking of right old laughs, who's more powerful, the Fergie Association or the Gilluminati? Perhaps the latter is in trouble now they've been exposed. Listen, the Gilluminati will only ever be as exposed as they want to be. And that's the final word on that one.
Yeah, no, I think Fergie might be, you know, realpolitik, but he's right out in front. This is Lord Palmerston gunboat diplomacy from Ferguson. When he wants to win an argument, you know about it. David Gill, he's in the shadows. That's where the real power lies.
Absolutely.
You know, when the white smoke is puffing over Old Trafford, that's another one in the eye for the Chelsea and Arsenal and Liverpool. Yeah, Gill's in there doing the deals. Who's been bought off this weekend, referee-wise? I can't remember.
There was talk at some point that Howard Webb was involved, and that would have just been hilarious. I don't know if that's happening or not, but, you know. At bifurcated_MUFC, who, if you are on Twitter and like Man United and are not following, you're making a terrible mistake, asks, Nani looks on his way, and we've already lost Mame. Who's going to be left holding the Bebe? I thought we were a family club. Don't think it's going to be an issue, because the Bebe's going to be someone else's problem. We're sending him off to some adoptive home somewhere in the world at some point.
And talking of that kind of thing, Quim, will he be in goal for Braga at the weekend on midweek when United travel to Portugal for the European Cup?
Probably not, right? He's not first choice keeper.
No, he's not.
We're playing against Braga away. They caused us some problems at home, but we're really dominant in the group, and I think it's going to be, I definitely think Cheech will play in that game for sure, because a draw would be a magnificent result, you know, or essentially it doesn't even really matter if we lose this, does it?
Well, no, but that'd put more pressure on the last two games in the group than United want. A victory guarantees qualification, a draw almost certainly does. I think United will go there and win. You know, I didn't see much of Braga being a high-quality side, and it'd be interesting to see how many changes Ferguson makes, because it's in a very, very busy period. But this is United being able to play the reserves and the under-5s and the non-existent women's side in the last two games. Total dead rubbers if United go in there and win. So that seems like the most sensible choice, rather than rotating heavily, losing the game and there being pressure on the last two fixtures.
No, I mean, I think you're right, but I think there will be a good degree of rotation in that game as well, because I think Fergie will, I mean, this is the mistake we made last season, isn't it? So maybe Fergie will be sort of so chastened by that he won't make the changes. I mean, you said Braga weren't impressive, but, you know, Alan gave us all sorts of bother, didn't he? Braga were 2-0 up after about 20 minutes, and they did pretty much capitulate after that, but they definitely got some attacking talent, and, you know, they could put us in a difficult situation if we're not on our game, so I don't think they're to be taken too lightly. Having gone 2-0 up at Old Trafford is not something that loads and loads and loads of teams have done, is it?
We should have a lot of respect for Braga there. I think that's really important, and I think Ferguson will probably do that, and we'll go away there and win. And I suppose coming to the end of the show, we ought to do some predictions.
Yeah, let's do it.
So I'm thinking it's going to be about 11-8 to United in the Braga game, and it won't be so defensive in the Arsenal game. No, I'm going to say, because there are goals flying in at the moment, I'm going to say 2-1 to United against Arsenal, and I think we're going to go away. And, this is bold and ridiculous, but I think we're going to go away to Braga and we're going to win 1-0.
I think it's going to be a case of, Robin Van Persie for 90 minutes as we score a lot of goals against Arsenal and they score a lot of goals against us. I think it's going to be another one of those games. I'm going to go with 4-2 to us for no particular reason. And the Braga game, I think, might get a bit tetchy, and I think we might. I'm going to go with my classic, I don't think it's going to go that well away in Europe, unconvincing 2-0 win prediction. In fact, it's got to be 2-1 because we don't keep clean sheets, do we? So 4-2 and 2-1, that's my two predictions.
All right, well, that sounds like exciting stuff, and I think you're right. It's an exciting time to be a United fan. It's a slightly odd time to be a United fan because, really we are, as our friend Liz Worsley says on Twitter, an omnishambles through midfield and defence, and that really hasn't changed, has it? But with so much attacking talent that there's always going to be goals. I can't see a scenario in which United do not score against Arsenal on Saturday lunchtime. Weird kick-off time for that game, but Saturday lunchtime it is. I'm really, as I said at the start of the show, I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a cracking game, and let's hope we're talking about football because, yeah, God, I'm sick of talking about racism and controversy and a bit more racism and all of that on this show. I'd really like to just talk about a really, really good game and a nice United performance and another 3 points and there's the opportunity to go top of the league this weekend as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it would be extremely good if we were able to get to the top of the league. And before we go, top of the league in our winning competition prize is at Amun Palman, who says that Dongfan Chao is in his FIFA Ultimate Team because he's skint and it may earn him some lucrative sponsorship deals in China. I will send you a DM at Amun Palman with the code for your FIFA Ultimate Teams. Nothing to give away on the Rantcast this week. If anyone wants to give us competition prizes to give to the lovely listeners, just get in touch. You can get me at UTD Rantcast on Twitter. You can get Ed at United Rant. You can post a comment on the show page. You can leave us a review on iTunes. And if you feel so inclined, you can also chuck us some money. But I don't know why you'd want to do that, but if you do, unitedrant.co.uk/donate. And thank you so much to everyone that's done that so far.
Radical. Thanks very much for that, and we'll see you next week after a couple of cracking games coming up.
United!
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.